Every summer, I go camping in Yosemite National Park with my cousins, and every trip we spend a night stargazing. There's a village with markets and restaurants down the road from the campsites. Across the road from the village is a large field of tall grass with a winding narrow boardwalk that leads deep into the field. Imagine a boardwalk dock that reaches out into a bay, but instead of open water, it's a field surrounded by towering trees. This spot is where we usually sit to watch the stars. This night of stargazing was uneventful as the sky was cloudy that night and we weren't able to see the stars at all, so we just sat there and talked for a bit. One of my cousins noticed a light deep within the woods that was still and bright. He pointed it out because he thought it was odd how there was a light in that direction to begin with, as that area of the woods has no buildings or campsites, which meant that there shouldn't be people in that area, and it was very late by this time. We moved closer towards that area of the woods along the boardwalk and were able to see that the light was twinkling. It looked as though the light came from a flame. It's strict in the rules of any wooded national park that you shouldn't light flames in areas that don't have a designated fire pit. My cousin was certain that where the light was coming from was empty and open woods, and was well out of distance from any campsites, roads, and housing. The flame must have been very deep into the woods, because no matter how close we got on the boardwalk, the light wasn't becoming any more clear to make out. We stopped when we heard commotion as though a large group of people were there. We assumed that there must have been a party going on until we heard chanting. It started as loud party sounds, but slowly turned into synchronized whooping and then howling. Not like a wolf howl, but more like harmonized groans and wailing. The voices became more guttural and seemed as though the people making the noises were almost in pain or misery. The sounds we heard were no longer ignorable, and it was obvious something odd was happening in those woods. Before I knew it, I was the only one closest to the end of the boardwalk, because when I turned around, I saw that all my cousins had retreated and huddled far behind me, staring with me into the trees. The faint sounds of wailing were enough to know that whatever was going on around that night was not a party. The next night, my cousins and I ventured into the woods in the general direction where we saw the light, and sure enough, it was empty woods in every direction for an acre or two. No signs of camps or cabins. The only evidence of any people being there was a large patch of dirt and pine needles where we found masses of bare footprints in the mud and soil. I think we experienced a cult that night, which is still strange to me that they even exist. I wonder to this day what type of cult they were, and deep down wish we had investigated more that night and gotten closer, even though that would have been scary. When I was 19, I was living with my mom, her boyfriend, and my boyfriend in a desert town that neighbors Joshua Tree National Park. We lived in a small house on a dirt road right on the edge of the national park. Our backyard and beyond was all protected land. All the roads in the area were paved, but for some reason, ours wasn't. There was also no streetlights on our street, which made for great stargazing but very limited viewing capabilities at night. This happened in February, and it gets cold at night in the winter, and we even get a good snow every so often. It all started with noises outside my bedroom window late at night. I even heard a cell phone go off once. My boyfriend even said that he thought he saw somebody running away from my house once when he looked out the window to investigate. This went on and off for a week or so and seemed creepy, but so far harmless. Aside from the phone, which only I heard, it was blamed on the wind or animals in the bushes. Then one night, my boyfriend and I were on the back porch having a smoke. Suddenly, a small rock came hurtling off out of the dark, empty desert across from us. We looked at each other puzzled and startled, and then got up and went towards the door. Just as he opened it, a bigger rock the size of a golf ball came out of nowhere and hit him in the head. It bounced off of him and then hit me. We were both shaken and immediately told my mom and her boyfriend. As we were telling them, more rocks were being thrown, hitting the house, windows, and rolling off the roof. They soon after ceased, and though shaken up, we moved on with the evening. The next night around 10 p.m., the rocks started up again. We were all in a panic, and the guys decided to go out and look for whoever was doing this and teach them a lesson. So they went out into the desert with my big German Shepherd wolf mix to investigate. My mom's boyfriend was really into martial arts, so they had various weapons with them just in case. They had been out in the desert for about 30 minutes so far, and I was inside playing a video game. Suddenly, I heard a crash at the front door, followed by a yelp. I jumped up to see what was going on, and under the door, I saw my dog's foot sticking out on my side of the door, which was closed. My dog had run into the door with so much force that his foot went underneath it. I quickly opened it, and that giant fearless dog had peed himself. Tail tucked between his legs, he hauled it back inside the house and hid. Now, I've seen that dog chase off packs of wild dogs and coyotes. He wasn't afraid of anything. Whatever he saw in the desert that night, I'll never and probably don't ever want to know. I had never seen him like that before or ever again after that night. The guys came back shortly after with nothing to report. Right after they came back inside, the rocks started up again. This time we called the cops, but when they showed up, they said it was probably just some drunk person messing around with us and left it at that. A couple of nights after that, the guys would go hunting outside for whatever it was and never found a trace of anything. The rocks continued on and off for 2 or 3 more nights, whenever somebody wasn't searching outside. Then, one night, the guys decided to get a jug of wine and just sit outside on the front porch with all the weapons and just wait. They started yelling threats out into the dark desert, which got worse and more twisted as the wine began to flow. The threats were dark and disturbing as the night wore on, and had there been someone out there hiding, I imagine they were probably a little scared at this point. My mom called from work and wanted to talk to her boyfriend, so we went inside to take the call. Just as he answered the phone, I heard my boyfriend yell from outside, and I heard him running away into the desert. He came back a few minutes later with cactus prongs protruding from his leg. He said that he chased someone wearing all black through the desert until he drunkenly fell into a cactus bush. After that night, the rocks stopped. I'll never know who or what was hiding out there or why they did what they did. Who would hide out in the desert at night in the middle of the winter throwing rocks for hours on multiple different nights? It was such an elaborate prank if that's what it was for no reason. I still don't feel safe in the desert at night over 10 years later. It was our 10th anniversary, so my husband and I decided to go camping, just the 2 of us, and of course our dog. There's a big national park and camping area near where we live, a little less than an hour's drive away, so that's where we were heading. It's basically a large forest with many small lakes, ponds, trails, and camping sites around. Pretty popular place during the summer, but we still saw some people even though it was late September and the weather was cold. We found a good spot next to a lake and set up our camp. It was a beautiful day, so we wanted to hike a bit in the forest. There was a nice long path that was going around the lake where we had our camp, so we chose to go that way. The lake was quite small, and there was another camping site by it. You could see from there a camp, and from there you could also see our camp, and the camps were almost on opposite sides of the lake. We walked past the other camp and saw a man there alone, just standing and staring at us, not answering when we greeted him. He was maybe in his late 20s, around the same age as us. I thought at that point that maybe he was just shy and a little weird. He had a small tent set up and some other stuff all around the place, so I figured he had been there a while. We just continued walking and didn't think much of it. Eventually, we got to our camp and started to set up our tent before it got too dark. We made some food by the fire and just sat there enjoying the peace. Suddenly, our dog started barking like crazy. She was tied to a long wire around a tree. We immediately realized that she wasn't just paranoid and there was really something in the woods and it was near. It had been very dark for hours at that point. I took the dog and leash and my husband started to look around with his bright headlamp. Our dog just kept barking. We were confused and sure it was some kind of animal, maybe a bear or a moose, but we couldn't understand why it wasn't scared of us and why it wouldn't run away. My husband went ahead to the path that leads to the other camp. Right when he got to the path, which was less than 30 feet away from our camp, he saw something on the ground. I told him to go check it out and followed with our dog. He stopped, turned to me and said, "It's a human laying on the ground." The first thing I thought was maybe they were hurt or dead or something. They just laid there not moving, facing the ground. We asked, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" And then they suddenly just stood up. It turned out to be the guy from the other camp. He was very scared of our dog and told me not to let her near him. I was kind of relieved that it wasn't some bear or something that was going to eat us, but I soon learned that a bear might have been less scary than this guy. After he stood up, he walked straight to our campfire and sat down. My husband tried to ask multiple times why he was sneaking in the dark forest without any light. He didn't give us any answer. We even laughed a bit and told him how we thought he was a bear or some wild animal, but he didn't even smile. He just stared at the fire, looking annoyed. His right leg was soaking wet. He had probably stepped off the path and dipped it in the lake on his way to our camp. He sat with us for 30 minutes, not talking much. He also clearly wanted to know where our dog was always. I saw he had a knife hanging from his belt, but I guess that's not that weird when you're in the woods. Every few minutes he put his hand in his pocket and just peeked at whatever was in there. It was kind of like checking the time on your phone without taking it from your pocket, but it didn't look like he had a phone in there. I felt very uncomfortable and anxious by the whole situation. So when the 30 minutes had passed, he again stood up and mumbled about going back to his own camp and left. He never gave us any explanation as to why he came to our camp or why he was stalking us in the dark. He had tried very hard not to be seen when we found him. When I thought he was far enough, I told my husband that there was no way I was sleeping in that tent. Fortunately for me, he agreed and said that the guy might come back when we were sleeping. I just wanted to leave as soon as possible, so my husband started packing things up and I was standing with the dog and looking around with the light if he decided to come back. Just when we almost had all our stuff in the car, I saw a quick flash of light on the path from the guy's camp towards ours. He was coming back. Maybe he thought that we went to sleep because he couldn't see our campfire anymore. So yeah, we got into the car and left quick. I don't know if we overreacted, but I had such a bad feeling about him. Who crawls in the dark, wet forest alone just to talk to some strangers? I'm just glad we had our dog with us. This trip made me realize that people are probably the scariest thing to find at night when you're camping. A few years ago, my partner and I decided to take a trip to California to see some of the state parks, ghost towns, and off-the-beaten-path things that don't get a lot of tourist traffic. For the first leg of the trip, everything went great. We camped in our car, found some great picturesque landscapes, creepy ghost towns, scenic views, and forgotten highways. I absolutely loved it. After about a week and a half on the road, we decided it was time to start heading to back home in Oregon. But we decided to take the scenic route for some of it instead of just driving straight home. Our meandering path took us through Death Valley National Park, where there was a short hike to a beautiful waterfall we had seen online and wanted to do before heading back. We found the trail without issue and began the mile hike to the waterfall. Death Valley is desolate, and it's a creepy place that has spooked me bad on more than one occasion, but something about this trail was different, sinister even. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I couldn't hear anybody around us though. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. There were no cars on the trailhead when we got there, so I figured we were alone, but I didn't feel that way. The feeling persisted until we reached the end of the mile hike and saw the waterfall. We sat for a moment, took a few pictures, and started hiking back towards the car. I still felt like something was wrong. I felt eyes on me and had a sort of feeling of dread for seemingly no reason at all. I tried to shake it off, but I just couldn't. I started walking a little faster to our car. We got there without incident. We started throwing our hiking poles and water bottles into the back seat of the car. I noticed there was a black SUV with limo-tinted windows parked next to us in the trailhead parking lot. The car was not running. I didn't see anybody around, and it didn't seem like anybody was in it. But where was the driver? The only place the driver could have been was on the same trail as my partner and I, but I hadn't seen or heard the driver on the trail. It was an out-and-back trail with very steep rocky cliffs on either side of the trail, so the chances of me seeing the driver were high if they were on the trail. The chances of them being off the trail were slim, as the undergrowth was extremely heavy until you got off the cliffside. I'm also certain that I would have heard somebody crashing through the undergrowth near the trail. As I was thinking about this and getting more and more anxious, I saw a huge man emerge silently from the bushes next to the trail to the waterfall. When I say silently, I mean it. He made no noise at all. He was easily at least 6'4", strong-looking, and covered in what my partner believed were criminal tattoos. He had a baseball cap pulled down low over his sunglasses, a long full beard, some kind of rifle slung across his back, and a large hunting knife on his belt. He was holding what appeared to be a cell phone in his hands and waving down my partner. I realized that this huge man had a gun, and the distance between him to us was irrelevant, but I was in panic mode. The man said that he found this cell phone near the waterfall and didn't want us to leave without it. We both quickly checked our pockets and realized that we both had our cell phones, and we both assumed that this was a setup for a robbery or something far more sinister. We jumped into the car, fired her up, and drove up the dirt road as quick as we could. The man just stared at us through the rear window as we drove off. It terrifies me to think that he was out there with us the whole time we were hiking, and we didn't hear him, see him, or even know that he was there. I never would have known the man was out there with us had he not chosen to make his presence known. I'm not going to lie, it really made me think twice about hiking alone in the woods or in isolated and desolate areas. I also find myself wondering what would have happened had we chosen to engage with him. This story is from when my wife, who was then my girlfriend, and I lived in South Africa. There are a lot of game farms and lodges in South Africa, especially around the area of Kruger National Park. This incident took place on a very tranquil 4-star game farm close to the southern tip of Kruger National Park. We had frequented the lodge over the 5 years before this incident as it was a favorite spot for my girlfriend and me. The lodge had a very nice central area with a pool and restaurant, and the tented chalets were spread out around the property. The chalets were very private and set up in a bush so that you could not see the next one over and could only hear your neighbors if they were very loud. Sadly, the lodge had fallen on hard times and had gone backwards a bit. The weekend this incident took place, only 2 of the 25 units were occupied for the Friday night, and we were the only ones there for the Saturday night. It made me feel a little bit uneasy. To make matters worse, the lodge and farm manager came by on Saturday morning, saying he was leaving the farm for the weekend. He said if we needed anything just to help ourselves in the restaurant fridges and to leave a note and we could settle the bill the next week. It was nice that we would have the pool and jacuzzi all for ourselves. We left to go visit different parts of the national park after the manager left, and we stayed out for most of the day. We got back around 3 p.m., and as we got out of the car, I got goosebumps. It was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit out, so I didn't feel cold. As we approached the chalet, I noticed large shoe prints over my and my girlfriend's prints from the morning. That seriously put me on edge. I approached the chalet and noticed the prints turned around and walked back the way they came. Everything seemed in order at the chalet. We went for a swim and had a game drive around the farm and returned around 5:30. We started to make the fire, barbecue our meat, and prepare some other food. Both my girlfriend and I seemed quite on edge and very quiet. We sat down to eat at around 8 p.m. As we sat down, I looked at my girlfriend and noticed she looked very worried. I asked her what was wrong, and she said that she had a bad feeling and that we needed to leave now. I said I felt the same and we should probably leave after we ate. She refused to sit down and eat though, saying that we needed to leave now, as in immediately, not after we ate. I didn't argue with her, so we chucked our food in the cooler, grabbed our bags, and ran to the car. As we drove out the gate, we dropped the keys in the box and drove away, and the feeling of dread slowly went away. We made the almost 100-mile drive home in the dark and slept in our own bed. We woke up Sunday morning and went about our day as normal. About 4 p.m. that afternoon, my phone rang, and I saw it was the number from the lodge manager. I answered, and he frantically asked if we were okay. I told him that we were safe and sound at home and that we had left the national park last night. He started explaining what happened after we left, and I got ice cold. Apparently, the lodge was broken into and ransacked the Saturday night. They took everything of value, and what they could not take, they destroyed. It was a group of 5 men that did it. Apparently, there was evidence that they ransacked a chalet as well. Only one. The one that my girlfriend and I were booked into. The one that we would have been sleeping in had we not so abruptly left the previous night. So it meant they had been watching us, and the boot prints was somebody keeping tabs on us. The lodge had cameras, but the chalets did not. We left just after 8 p.m. Probably about 8:10 is when we had everything in the car and started driving down the road. It was probably about 8:20 when we left the farm, as it's a few miles drive from the lodge to the gate down a gravel road to exit the national park. The cameras at the lodge caught the first signs of movement at the lodge just before 8:30. At least one of the men was visibly armed with a firearm in the footage, and a few had machetes. We had probably missed the intruders by only 5 to 10 minutes at most. I shudder to think of what would have happened had we been there. There was nobody nearby. We were completely alone on the farm. Only a little bit of cell reception at the lodge, and none at the chalet itself. We would not have been able to call for help. Needless to say, we did not go to the lodges or isolated areas for a long time after that. And sadly, the lodge and farm went under not long after, and it got sold in an auction. That incident has shocked us both a bit, and we vowed to always trust our instincts and intuition, and to tell each other if something felt off. We both had that uneasy feeling since about 3 p.m. that Saturday afternoon when we came back, and the reason none of us said anything to each other was because we didn't want to spoil the weekend for one another. That almost cost us possibly the ultimate price. One of the things that I really enjoy doing is traveling and exploring the outdoors. I've been to many national parks and hiking trails over the past few years. I didn't really travel that much until about 3 years ago when I changed jobs. I have a lot more time to travel with the new job. Anyways, this story takes place a couple of years back when I was pretty new to traveling. I went to a national park that I was excited about. It wasn't all that popular, but it had some good hiking trails. I went there by myself and started hiking in the morning. There were so many trails in the park and after I did one, I went to the local town. After hanging out there for a while, I got the itch to do some more hiking, so I went back later in the afternoon. The park was not too busy. It was large and spread out, so it depended on what trails and sections you went to. I went to a different spot to go hiking. There were all kinds of different terrain, some hills, mountains, as well as woods. What I didn't know was that this trail was much longer and more complex than the other one. I'm sure if I would have looked at a sign at the beginning, I would have seen that it was more challenging, but I don't recall observing anything like that. I pretty much just went on the trail and started. There really wasn't anybody else on the trail that I noticed. It was very quiet, and I was enjoying it to start out. Pretty soon though, I was going farther and farther, and I realized that it was starting to get late. The sun would be setting in about 30 minutes. I went a little bit farther and then decided to head back. There were multiple areas where the trail went in different directions, sometimes even splitting 3 ways. Meanwhile, I had only seen just a couple of people the entire time, and they were all near the beginning. I tried going back, but soon was very confused even what direction I was going in. I blamed this on the terrain, because there were a lot of areas where you had to climb up or down. Rocks would be sort of used as stairs in some of the areas. So I was trying to find my way back for probably like 30 minutes before it started to really get dark out. At that point, I realized that I wasn't making much progress. I took out my phone, but had no signal. I never really had good signal the entire time that I was at the park. I turned off my phone and then turned it on again, but that didn't do anything. So as I was walking back in what I thought might be the right way, I soon heard something. It sounded like somebody else was walking on the trail behind me. I turned around and looked to see a man there walking behind me. I stopped and waited for him to catch up. He was wearing black pants and a black shirt and had longer dark brown hair, but he was also wearing a hat and sunglasses. I wasn't really sure exactly where he had come from, but I was glad that he was here. I said hi to him, and he said hi back to me. I told him that I wasn't sure of the way out, and he said right away that he knew it. The man told me that he had hiked this trail many times before, and he knew the entire thing like the back of his hand. I described to him where I had parked, and he told me that he could lead me there. I felt much better hearing that, and the man told me to follow him. Then we both started hiking back. During this time, he didn't really say anything to me, and he sort of went fast. I didn't say much back to him either. I assumed that he was going fast because it was getting darker and darker out. We hiked for a good 20 minutes, and that's when I was first questioning him, because even though I got lost myself, and clearly I'm not the best with directions, I just sensed that we were going the wrong way. One of the turns that he made, I was sure was wrong, but I didn't say anything, because who was I to criticize? I got myself lost. Maybe 10 more minutes went by, and it seemed like we were only going deeper in. We passed by places that I was 100% sure I had never been to. I was hoping that maybe it was some kind of a shortcut. Possibly any second we would turn out right near the entrance to the path, but that wasn't happening. I finally asked him how much farther it would be. He claimed that it was not that much farther at all, and said for me to keep following him. After maybe 5 more minutes and still nothing, I wasn't sure if he was clueless or leading me the wrong way. We kept going, and I saw that we were headed for a dense woods. Then he said, "It's right over here." I knew this wasn't it. There was no parking lot in sight, and the terrain was nothing like where I had entered. I said that it didn't look like where I had gone in, and I asked him if there were multiple connecting parking lots. Maybe he got it confused for another one. The guy just said no, and that was it. He was still walking in front of me. At that point, he started to climb down this really steep area of rocks. I wanted to just get away from him. As soon as he had made it down and I was about to go down, I just turned and ran. I went the complete opposite direction and started sprinting down the trail away from him. When I first started running away, I heard him climbing back up the rocks. It would give me a pretty decent head start on him though. I had no plan at all, I was just winging it. I just felt in danger, like the guy was leading me into the middle of the woods. After running for maybe 50 feet, I went through some really tall grass and bushes where I would be sort of hidden. I just kept going through them and eventually came out to a connecting trail.
Soon, I no longer heard the guy behind me anymore. Then I slowed down. I felt better, but it was still dark out and I was still lost. I walked at a quick pace, trying to go more in the direction that I thought was correct. I walked for probably another 20 minutes. Soon, I heard somebody walking up ahead again. I saw the person quickly and realized that it was a park ranger. I approached him and asked if he knew how to get out. Of course, he did, and I followed him. The ranger was very nice, and I told him about the guy that I had encountered. He seemed concerned about it, and said that the guy was not leading me near any exit at all. He radioed in and reported it, and after we made it back to the parking lot, he said he would investigate. After that, I left. For the rest of my trip, and ever since then, I've been much more careful. A couple of years ago, I went to the Grand Canyon during the summertime. I went there on a road trip with my best friend Amanda. I had never been to the Grand Canyon before, but she had been there once when she was younger. We drove on this one road for the longest time that led to the park. Once we entered, we followed another road into one of the main parking lots. I was surprised at how big the park was, and there are campsites on it and several trails. When we got there, there were quite a few other people. We went down one trail to see the actual canyon. There are walking trails going alongside of it and then many different lookout areas. We walked along it and stopped at several of those lookout spots, many of which were pretty crowded. At probably the second one, I remember I got approached by this one guy. He was a man that was sort of big, with dark hair, and he said hi to me. He told me that his name was Joe. Then he asked me and Amanda if we would be interested in going on a tour, and said that he drove a guided tour. I wasn't and said no thanks. Then he asked me if I was sure, and I said yes. After that, he walked away. We took a bunch of pictures and stuff and then moved along. Probably about 15 minutes later, I would say, we were at another overlook area. There were other people here as well, but not quite as many. I noticed the same guy, Joe, and he was walking over. Then he approached us again. This time, he said that he forgot to mention that the tour was free because somebody else had canceled. He asked once more if we wanted to go. I thought about it for a second, but still didn't want to go, and said no to him. He asked if we were sure once more, and we said yes. Then he walked away again. It seemed a little bit strange. He wasn't going around and asking anybody else, just us. He walked away and back onto a path, and Amanda and I stayed in the lookout spot for a couple more minutes. After that, we kept walking along the canyon and looking out at different viewpoints. I remember that sometime later, we stopped at a spot and saw Joe yet again, a little ways away. I was afraid that he was going to approach us once more, but he didn't. He was with another guy, and they were just kind of standing around. Amanda and I then walked in another direction. There were a few paths that went through some nearby areas, and not as many people were on them. We walked through a couple of the paths. I remember about halfway through one of the trails that we went on, I saw Joe again. He was walking a ways behind us. That's when I started to really get creeped out by him. Still, it didn't seem like too big of a deal, because there were some other people around, and the paths were not super wooded or anything. We later went back to the canyon again and didn't see him. Then we finished up at the gift shop, and each of us got some souvenirs. In the gift shop, guess who I saw again? Joe, and he was with his friend. He did not approach us, but it was just odd to see him there. Were they following us? I thought they had tours to give, and they clearly were not. By the time we got our souvenirs, it was starting to get late and the sun was setting. We decided to drive back because our hotel was over an hour away. We went back to my car in what I assume is the main parking lot because it was pretty large. When we were getting to my car, I saw the two guys. They were a long ways away and just entering the parking lot. I kept an eye on them because I was suspicious. I noticed them look over at us, and then they went to an SUV, which was sort of old looking, and parked on the other side of the lot. Is that what they were supposed to be giving tours in? I wasn't really buying the tour story at all, and was glad that we didn't say yes to them. We got inside of my car and then started to leave. But as we were driving down the road to go out of the park, the SUV that the guys were driving went behind us. Now, if my memory is correct, There's really just one main highway that leads to and from the Grand Canyon, and there isn't a whole lot on it for like an hour. But just outside of the park, there are a few restaurants and gas stations. We decided to get some gas because my car's tank was a little low, and we didn't know where the next opportunity to fill up would be. As we pulled into the gas station, the guys pulled in behind us. Now we were really concerned. I started filling my car with gas, and the SUV parked in a spot on the side. Nobody got out. After I was done fueling, Amanda and I went inside the store. We were going to get some snacks. The gas station was pretty large inside, and we were looking through stuff when we noticed the same two guys come inside. We tried avoiding them, and they didn't seem to be trying to approach us or anything, but I still knew that it wasn't a coincidence that they were here. We got a few things and then left the store. When we did, we noticed the guys leaving right behind us. We hurried and quickly got to the car and went inside. The guys went back to their SUV. Then I left, and unfortunately, they followed right after us. We both went onto the main highway, leaving the Grand Canyon. There were not really any exits, but I tried slowing down, speeding up, and changing lanes. Whatever I did, the SUV remained right behind me. We were thinking of what to do. After a while, we got the idea to drive to a police station. Unfortunately, there wasn't one for a while. Over the next few minutes, things remained the same. We drove until we were finally off the highway, and then had directions to the nearest police station. We drove there, and luckily, the SUV did not follow us in. After that, we reported what happened and gave a description of the guys. However, we did not get a license plate number of their SUV. After that, we were able to make it back to our hotel all right. I'm really glad that we got away from those guys. Several years ago, I was traveling for work by myself. I was on a bit of a road trip, which went through several different states. On the way back home, I was passing through some of South Dakota, where I had never been to before. I knew Mount Rushmore was there, so I decided to go a little out of the ways to see it. I followed the directions to the park, and I remembered that I got there sometime in the afternoon. It was a little bit later, but I didn't have a lot of control over that. There was enough daylight that I should still get to see it. The park has a few different parking lots, and some are on different levels. I went to one lot that was on the top, and there was a quiet road near it with some trees on the other side. There were a decent amount of other cars in the parking lot when I got there, but it wasn't packed. After parking, I got out and walked over to the park. It wasn't that far of a walk or anything. I soon was able to see the mountain, and most of the other people were over there as well. I stayed there for a while, just looking at the view and taking pictures. Many people started to head out not long after I got there. Before I knew it, I was one of the only people left. The sun was setting, and then I decided to go back and hit the road. I left the park and walked back out to the parking lot where my car was. I remember that when I was walking over to the parking lot, I didn't see anybody else around. I had seen some other people going in one of the parking lots on the other side. My car was one of probably less than 10 that were still there. As I was walking, something caught my eye, and I also heard a noise. It was coming from across the quiet road and just inside the woods. I looked over to barely see a tree branch moving, but I did not see anything else. I thought that it might be some kind of animal. There are a lot of cool wild animals in that area, so I stopped and kept looking. I didn't see anything until soon I saw a man step out. I thought this was weird, but it was even more weird that the man started walking towards me, and he was moving pretty fast. I walked faster and soon made it to my car. When I was unlocking it and getting inside, I noticed that the man was now sprinting in my direction. That made me go in the car even faster. When I did, I immediately started the engine and began driving away. The man did not reach my car. I looked around to try to see him, and just barely noticed him going out of sight of the parking lot a ways away. I drove around to the exit, and then went on one of the quiet roads. There were some roads that went sort of through the woods leading out of the park. You had to go pretty slow on them, and they were kind of winding. I drove on it, and about halfway to the park exit, I saw the guy coming out of the woods. He must have ran there. He walked right into the middle of the street. When I saw him, I had to slow down. However, I was able to go around him, and he just stared at me. Then I got past him and soon left the park. After that, I called and reported him for his strange behavior. I'm not sure who that guy was or what he was doing, but it was very weird. This story takes place when I went to Yellowstone National Park with some friends. Obviously, the park is massive, and there are hiking trails that you can go on. That's what my group was going to be doing on the day of this story. We spent a total of 3 days in the area, and this was the final day. There were 7 of us total, so a decent number of people. We started hiking on one of the trails. I don't recall exactly which one it was, but it went through a lot of woods, and by some streams and things like that. It was one of the best trails that I've ever been on, and I was really enjoying it. My group soon got really split up though. Everybody was kind of going at their own pace. Some people would stay back and look at something while others kept on walking. I was one of the people that got caught in the back. For a while, it was just me and 2 other people, with the others out of sight. We didn't think too much of it though. Then I stopped at a stream and thought that the others were also stopping. I was looking at something, but I soon realized that they didn't stop and it just kept on walking. Now I was all by myself in the back. Still, it wasn't that big of a deal, because I thought I could just catch right back up to them. I started walking on the path again and walked at a fast pace so I would catch up. After the stream, the trail went through a sort of dense woods. It was not that long into that part that suddenly I heard a noise up ahead. I wasn't sure what it was, but then a woman emerged from the woods. I was confused by this because I didn't recognize her. She walked out kind of in front of me and then asked me if I could help her. I asked what was going on, and she said that her friend needed some help. Then she told me to follow her and started walking back into the woods. There was a very small trail leading into the woods that did not look like any kind of a real trail. It was either an animal trail or just caused by the woman walking back there. I didn't know what the situation was of her friend needing help, but I followed her into the woods. It was pretty thick in there, and we were going over rocks and tall grass and stuff. The visibility was not the greatest. I kept following her farther and farther into the woods. This went on for probably close to 5 minutes. I really couldn't believe how far back we were going. It made me wonder why she was so far back here in the first place. Then, finally, we came to this little clearing. The woman entered it, and I was about to, but what I saw were 2 large men just standing around. They were each wearing the old white hockey goalie masks, the really creepy looking ones. That was enough to make me instantly turn around and start running back. There was no friend needing help or anything there, just 2 men in masks. I didn't even think about it, and was just running and getting hit with tree branches left and right. I heard somebody start to run after me. This caused me to go even faster. I'm not sure who was chasing me, if it was just one of them or all 3 of them. Nobody said anything, but we were just running for a while. I didn't stop, and luckily I was in pretty good shape and ran daily. I was able to not have to stop until I got back to the regular trail. By that point, I didn't really hear anybody running after me, and when I made it back to the trail, I went in the direction that my friends had gone. Just moments later, I saw one of my friends coming back in my direction. She had been looking for me and asked me what was going on. I told her to keep moving, and we both jogged for a while. When I was sure that we were not being chased or anything, I slowed down and told her the whole story. We decided to report it to park rangers, but the phone signal was going in and out, and it took a while before we could. We later caught up with the rest of the group, and I didn't let them out of my sight after that. For the rest of my time at Yellowstone, I didn't see those people, and I don't know exactly what was going on there. I'm hoping that it was nothing that bad, but I don't have an explanation for what it really was. This happened several months ago. I was at a national park that I had gone to by myself. I enjoy hiking as a hobby, and I don't live that far away from this park. So I went there and hiked on some of the many trails that they have. I ended up getting over 30,000 steps total that day, and by the time I was done and heading back, I was pretty tired. The trail that I hiked on connected to a parking lot that was usually pretty quiet. It was surrounded by mostly woods, and when I got back to it, the sun was setting. I went back to my car and got inside. At the time that I did, my car was the only one in the entire parking lot. When I got inside of my car, I went on my phone. I was texting back with some friends because I hadn't gone on my phone for most of the day. I should have left right away, but I chose not to, and was just kind of relaxing on my phone for a few minutes. I was looking down at my screen and not to my surroundings. Out of nowhere, I heard a knocking coming from my passenger side window. I looked over and saw nothing. I was very confused and also creeped out. I kept looking, but nobody was there. Then I looked around the entire parking lot. It was not very well lit at all, and it was dark out now, but I still saw nothing. Then I sat up and leaned over to look out of my passenger's window. When I did, just barely, I saw someone was crouched down. Whoever it was right up against my passenger's side door. Then they tried opening the door. I heard the door handle being grabbed, but thankfully it was locked. When that happened, I immediately put my car into drive. Then I hit the gas pedal and started driving away. When I did, the person stood up. I could see that it was a man, but beyond that, I couldn't tell anything about him. He ran alongside my car for a few seconds, still touching it and trying to keep up. Then I went too fast and he stopped. I saw him in my rear view mirror, standing in the middle of the parking lot. I left and went back out onto the road. Once I was there, I dialed 911 and reported the guy. After that, I was able to make it back home okay. Since then, I haven't been back to that park. I don't know who that guy was or what he was doing. It was very bizarre. I'm hoping that nothing like that ever happens again, though.
A couple of years ago, my husband and I took a road trip to Yosemite National Park. We didn't camp in the park, but we stayed outside of it at a hotel in a nearby town. One evening, while we were making the road trip back from the valley, I noticed that the headlights of our car caught what appeared to be somebody laying down on the side of the road, with both feet pointed towards the street. I told my husband that there was a person laying there as we passed by. My husband told me that I was just seeing things and maybe it was a trash bag or something, but I was so certain I just kept telling him no. For the rest of the drive back, we argued about it, and by the time we made it back to the hotel, I seemed to change my husband's mind. I think he realized how adamant I was about it, and he believed me. He asked me if I was sure about it and if I wanted to go back. I said yes, I was very certain, so we drove back to the spot. We made it past and I saw the person again, so we turned the car around. My husband then stopped next to the person and rolled down his window. He asked, "Are you okay?" There was no answer. One more time, even louder, he asked, "Are you okay?" Suddenly, a woman dressed in all black sat up. She was wearing a nice brown jacket, black pants, and had her purse and 3 water bottles. Her makeup was done nicely, and she seemed very sweet. I could tell that my husband was absolutely shocked. The woman looked to be in her late 40s, and I asked her where she was headed. She said that she was trying to get to the Chevron station up the road, and that her mom was going to meet her there to pick her up. I knew that something weird was going on, because where we found her and the Chevron station was still another 7 miles away. She said in her mind she thought it was only a mile from her hotel, and that she could make the walk. We offered her a ride, and she climbed into the back seat. As we drove, we tried to ask her questions, mainly just chit-chat. I asked why she was laying on the side of the road. She said she had gotten tired of walking and just laid down, ready to give up. It was winter and she had no hat or gloves with her. I could tell that she was very fragile. Once we arrived at the Chevron station, she thanked us, got out of the car, and sat on a bench in front of the closed Chevron station store. We offered to stay with her until her mom arrived, but she said she would be fine. I reminded her that there was no cell phone reception in the area and triple-checked that she didn't want us to wait with her. She said no, and we drove back to our hotel at that point and noticed that there were now 2 police cars in the parking lot. They had not been there the first time that we arrived back from the valley that evening. I told my husband I knew they had to be there for that woman. I calmly walked over to one of the cars and asked if they were looking for a missing woman. The officer told me that they were and asked if I had seen her. I explained the situation and that I really felt like the woman had something very bad happen to her. He thanked us for picking her up and giving her a ride. He couldn't tell me what had happened, but thought that her leaving and going somewhere was a smart choice. I asked the cops to please go check on her at the Chevron station to make sure that she was okay and that her mom finally did arrive. I realized that whatever had happened at the same hotel we were staying at. That evening, I looked up the local police log and found that a domestic violence dispute had broken out at the hotel. The woman had been very badly beaten, and she was so terrified that she was willing to walk in the dark without a flashlight just to escape. It's my guess that after walking about a half-mile from the hotel, she was in so much pain that she needed to lay down. I got the feeling like she thought she might lay down and die there on the road. She couldn't go back to the hotel because she had already escaped and gone to the front desk to call her mom. Her husband knew she'd be there and would have to come and get her. The front office called the police for her while she escaped. It's my understanding that the man who hurt her was her husband and he was arrested. I always wondered about her, whether she went back to him. Hopefully not. I also hope that the cops ended up checking on her and that her mom did come and pick her up. Back in 2016, my friends and I for the longest time had been itching to go camping to our local camping site in Los Padres National Park in Southern California. When we found the perfect weekend to go that didn't interfere with any of our work schedules, we set the date. 3 days before the trip, we found out that we were going to get hit by a rainstorm. Us, being the type of dudes that we are, didn't care if we got hit by the storm while camping, so we packed up our cars and made the 45-minute drive to the campsite. The campsite was a family-friendly one where there were about 100 camping lots that circled around the clearing in the forest. We found the perfect spot that was underneath huge thick trees that would help block as much rain as possible, and it also helped that the restrooms were only 30 yards away. As soon as we got to our spot, we took advantage of the afternoon sky being clear for the moment, and we rushed to set up. The layout that we did was that we pitched our tents close by, where our tent doors were only 6 feet apart. The reason we did this was in order to combat the rain. I brought a 30-foot by 30-foot thick blue canopy tarp that I threw over to cover us from the rain above and from the rain that would be running on the ground. It ended up being perfect for the rainy weekend, but whenever you would walk around the tent, you would be making so much noise from crunching the plastic tarp. Hours passed by and we were all around the campfire. It was late into the evening, and this was the first time that I noticed that there were barely any other campers. Mainly the other people were camping in their RVs. They were the smart ones, unlike my friends and I that were sleeping in 2 small tents, with our only protection from the rain being the blue tarp. I was getting tired from a long day of work, and I decided that I was going off to knock out, and my friends followed my lead as well. The way that the sleeping arrangements were was that I had my friend Ray sleeping in my tent, and Adam and Seth were sleeping in their own tent. Before I called it a night, I whispered to Ray and told him, "I'm going to prank call Seth and Adam, but I'm not going to say anything." Ray smiled as I dialed my friends up. I called them on a restricted number. Ray and I were holding in our laughter as they ignored our call. I decided to do it one more time. They did answer this time, and Seth replied with a nervous hello into the phone. Ray and I had to hold in our laughter as we kept as quiet as possible, not wanting to make any noises that would give off that it was us. I held the phone close to my mouth as I began to breathe heavily in a murderous way. I ended the call, and just hearing them freak out the way they did was fun. They eventually asked if it was us, and after a while, Ray gave in and let them in on the joke. We all eventually calmed down from laughing, and since I fall asleep relatively easily, I was out in a matter of minutes, while Ray, Adam, and Seth were up for a while longer. I was the first of my friends to wake up in the morning, and I had breakfast already cooking by the time everyone else woke up. The smell of me cooking woke my friends up one by one, and they got out of their tents. As we were eating, Adam spoke up and said, "Hey, the prank that you both pulled last night went a little too far." They went on to say that it was one thing to prank call, but then to walk around their tent and go inside of it in the middle of the night was totally off limits. I had no idea what they were talking about, and after some back and forth of questioning and firmly stating no more pranks had been pulled last night, I heard the full story. So, to explain, after I fell asleep, about an hour passed by where Ray, Seth, and Adam were still up. All was quiet in the forest until the sounds of footsteps were heard stepping on our blue tarp that was on the ground. At first, my friends thought that it could have just been a forest animal wandering around, but the heavy footsteps were a dead giveaway that it was a person. The person had been walking all around our tents, making constant figure eights. The person would also place their fingers on the tent fabrics and run them up and down. The footsteps finally stopped after a couple of minutes, right between the doors of our tents. The 3 of them already had their hearts pounding out of their chests. It was silent for a long time, until the sound of a tent zipper being slid open was made. As Adam said, the tent door was only open about halfway, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. But in the darkness, both Seth and Adam saw the silhouette of a man's face pop his head into the tent to look at both of them. Adam and Seth faked being asleep the entire time, but they kept their eyes locked onto the man. The man then opened the tent fully and walked inside the tent, just standing in the entrance. The man didn't say a word or do anything, just watched the both of them laying in their sleeping bags. After the longest minute ever, the man just stepped back out of the tent and his footsteps were heard walking away, disappearing into the night. The entire time that this was happening, Seth and Adam thought that it was either me or Ray doing this as another prank, and Ray thought that it was Adam or Seth doing this. Back to us arguing back and forth at the breakfast table, we were interrupted by a man walking to our campsite, and he greeted us with, "Good morning, boys. How did the four of you sleep last night?" This man spoke in a smoker's voice, and he wore a dirty, sweat-stained white t-shirt, and his blue jeans looked as they had never been washed. He smelt like liquor, and his words were all mumbled together. We didn't say a word to this guy, and he asked us if we had any cigarettes to spare him. I told him that we didn't smoke, and he said, "Oh, well, if you boys want to visit me in my RV, just stop by any time." The man continued to walk away towards the restrooms, and as he was done using it, walked back to our campsite. He didn't say anything this time, but he looked at us and gave us a nearly toothless smile, and he walked back to his RV. I took note of his RV, as it was the only RV that stuck out as being dirty and more run down than the others. We quickly summed up the man as the person who was walking around our tents last night, and Seth and Adam now remembered that they smelt liquor from the person who was standing in their tent. We all agreed that we would keep an extra eye out on this guy, and if he did spend another night, we would most likely report him to the park rangers if he tried anything else. When it was around lunchtime now, the man came back, not to use the restroom, but just to talk to us. He started the conversation and said, "So, are any of you boys interested in buying an RV? You can all go check it out right now. Look inside and see if you want to buy it." We told him that we were good, and this time while talking to him, we all responded very simply and sternly. The man seemed to notice this, and he walked away. The man did end up leaving a few hours before sunset, but the entire time that he was there, he kept glancing at us. The man had his RV about 50 yards away from us, and I noticed that he had a restroom right next to his RV. Why did he make an effort in walking all the way over to our campsite to use our restroom? Also, why did he even use the restroom if RVs come with restrooms installed in them? Whatever the man wanted, we were just glad that we were able to enjoy the rest of our weekend in peace after he left.
When I was around 16 or 17 years old, I was working at a local ski resort that is located deep in the national forest near my parents' house. I worked in the rental department and often picked up the late night shifts. Our resort offered a late night deal that lasted till around 4 a.m. or until the slopes were clear. I was a teenage girl, so normally I had a routine of having one of my coworkers walk with me to my car after my shift. However, this particular night I was complacent. I waved off the walk to my car from the guys that I worked with because they had to put some things away still and I didn't want to wait. It was cold and there was barely anyone in the large parking lot. When walking to my car, I noticed that there was a truck in the lot that was kind of idly driving around doing small donuts and rolling over the snowbanks. I noted that the truck seemed a little odd to just be driving slowly around an empty lot at 4 a.m., but I assumed it was somebody waiting to pick up one of my coworkers. I drove an old beat-up car back then, and it took forever to heat up, and I also had to clear the snow off of my car. While I was knocking off the snow, I realized that this truck was a little bit behind me and still hadn't left, even though I had been standing there for about 10 minutes. But I wasn't super alarmed at this point, and just kind of more aware of it being there. As I proceeded to leave the parking lot and make my way down the long winding road that led back to the national park, the truck slowly pulled out behind me and kept a bit of a distance. I got a little freaked out at this point and saw no one get into the car while I was there, and that it just decided to pull out after I proceeded to leave was strange. The fastest route to my parents' house from the ski hill is a very long and complicated way through the park. It involved using many side streets that not many people tend to take all the way through the park. I was hyper aware that this truck was indeed following me. They began to make the exact turns that I was making and was deliberately staying very far back below the speed limit. The creepy truck followed me for a good 15 minutes while I made extra turns that didn't even make sense for a driver to be making to try to leave the national park. When I got to one intersection that led to the normal route home, and a route that was completely out of the way, I decided to take the out of the way route and speed up to try to get away from the truck. I ended up pulling into a gas station, parked at the back of the lot, and turned my lights off to see if the truck would pass me. Sure enough, when the truck came, it slowed down. It was attempting to pull over into the lot when a cop car happened to pull up from the other side of the road. The truck sped back up and drove past the cop away from me, so I had a chance to escape. I was able to follow the cop car for a bit and then make it home the rest of the way without being followed or seeing the truck again. I definitely know that truck was following me from the ski resort,
because no person in their right mind would make all the turns that I did to end up on a road that was a straight shot from the ski hill. I never reported it or found out anything about the truck, but it scared me to think of what could have happened if I drove home instead and led them to where I lived. I never saw that truck again, but I'm glad I was aware of my surroundings, regardless of how safe and harmless driving home after work should be.
My friend Anna and I were staying in an old motel in the middle of Nebraska for the night. We were on a 1-week-long camping trip, checking out national parks and camping out in nature. However, this particular night, there was a huge rainstorm coming. We decided that it would be smart to stay in a hotel room for tonight to avoid a terrible stormy night of sleeping and having all our gear getting soaked. The closest motel we found was a small cheap strip of rooms in the middle of nowhere. We bought our room for the night from the redneck-looking guy working at the front desk. The rain started early in the evening, so we ended up staying in our room all night, drinking and playing some games to pass the time. Anna and I went to bed around midnight, and it was easy to fall asleep to the sound of the downpour of rain coming down all around us. I woke up at some point in the night, not exactly sure by what, but I noticed there was light pouring into our room. I sat up in bed and glanced towards the door where the light was coming from. We had chain-locked the door where it could be opened just a crack, and as I was fully awake now, I realized that's where the light was coming from. The slim shiver of light shone all the way into the room, stretching its way across the floor to the foot of my bed. A quick glance over at the bed next to me confirmed that Anna was still sleeping, and it was not her who had the door open. Now fully awake, I decided to get out of my bed and check it out. Once I got past the foot of my bed, the doorway entered my view, and I was shocked by what I saw. The door was indeed open a crack, just as much as the chain would allow, and an arm was reaching through the crack, fumbling around trying to undo the chain that was the only thing keeping the door from being completely open. Instincts and adrenaline took over for me immediately. I ran towards the door and slammed my whole body weight against it, forcefully closing the door onto the arm that was still reaching through the crack. I heard a grunt on the other side, and the arm withdrew from the crack, and whoever was on the other side vanished. Anna, who was awoken by all the commotion, called the police, alerting them that there was an attempted intruder at the motel we were staying at. It was close to 5 a.m. now, and even though it was early, Anna and I agreed to pack up our stuff and hit the road. As we left our motel room, the police were already at the front desk talking to the worker. We were approached by a cop and asked if we were okay and if we saw who the culprit was. The man who was working at the front desk also appeared and kept repeating that he didn't see anyone while he was working. Funny enough though, he was holding his right arm very gingerly, and even when he wasn't holding it pretending to cross his arms, it hung oddly at his side. Right before heading out, we informed the cops that we suspected it was the guy working at the front desk who was attempting to enter our room. They told us they would look into it, and that's the only information we were given before we drove off, continuing our journey. I have no idea if they ever confirmed that the man working at the front desk had been the one attempting to enter our room. It was comforting to me, though, that even if the man didn't face any legal actions for that night, I had either broke his arm or severely injured it. Perhaps that would stop him from trying anything crazy like that again. A couple of years ago, a group of friends and I planned a camping trip in Yellowstone Park. The four of us had been camping multiple times in national parks before, but never one the size of Yellowstone. It was going to be close to a week-long trip of sightseeing and enjoying nature. We had planned out well the first couple of days of the trip, determining where we would be camping and places to see. After those first couple days, though, we didn't have much of a plan, and we had decided that part of the adventure was being spontaneous and going wherever interested us. The first part of the trip went well, as we saw a lot of popular tourist attractions and had fun hanging out at night around our campsite. Towards the end of the trip, however, we were looking for a campsite to camp for the night and had a hard time finding one. We were in the stage of our trip where nothing was planned. It was already dark out, late at night, and every campground in the nearby area that we visited was already full and didn't have any room for us. Eventually, we drove past an open lot area that had some scattered fire pits created with stones and looked like a good spot to camp at. The area wasn't online, and didn't show up as a named campsite on Google Maps, but clearly people had camped there before. The area was empty, and we didn't see anyone, so we decided to set up camp there for the night. We had to set up the tent in the dark with flashlights. It was already late, so unlike the other nights of our trip, we didn't really hang out. We just got into the tent and fell asleep relatively quickly. I woke up in the middle of the night. My friends had shaken me awake and quietly whispered that something seemed off. Immediately, I understood what they were talking about, because from the woods surrounding our campsite, there was an odd number of bird sounds being made. It was still the middle of the night and not close to morning, so really, there should have been no birds making sounds, but instead, there were multiple different types of bird sounds every couple minutes. As a group, we agreed quietly and without turning on any sort of light to exit our tent and check it out. We left the tent and ended up huddling right beside our car, which was right next to the tent, since we had used the headlights for setting up the tent earlier. As we waited for our eyes to adjust to the dark and notice if we could see anything, the bird sounds got closer, but then stopped altogether. At that point, we knew that those sounds were not normal, and that it had to be people communicating to each other as they had been coming from different directions of the woods. It only took a quick non-verbal look at each other to decide that getting in the car would be the smartest thing to do right now. After scrambling to get in and then turn on the engine and lights, what we saw at the edge of the woods line running towards us was horrifying. There were two men humans running towards us. I call them humans because I don't even know if they were men or women because of how dirty and feral looking they were. We drove out of there as fast as we could, seeing 3 more people on the opposite side of the wood line when our headlights illuminated over that way. We drove through the night all the way until we had made it out of Yellowstone Park, abandoning our tent since all of us had our important valuables that we needed already in the car. None of us can recall or determine what area of the park we were in, but it definitely wasn't anywhere near a populated campground. We agreed to cut our camping trip a bit short and buy a hotel for the last night. We didn't go camping together again for a very long time after that scary night in Yellowstone.